Hope is here. The way to break free with your host, Angela Pedigo, will light a flame within you. Host Angela Pedigo is an author, speaker, and certified life recovery, grief, and joy restoration coach. Angela uses her own life experiences to help you navigate and guide you to success. She also has developed tools that incorporate her faith and her drive to overcome any obstacle in life. So please welcome the host of The Way to Break Free, Angela Pedigo.
Welcome, everybody, to The Way to Break Free. I am your host, Angie Pedigo, and I have my special guest with me here today, Miss Kelsey Klein. Kelsey is in recovery, rocking it. Mom, wife, you name it, she's doing the thing. So she's going to tell us all about that today. I think you'll enjoy her testimony. Welcome to the show, Kelsey.
Thanks for having me. It's a privilege.
Oh, thank you for coming on. I'm just so proud of you. I have loved watching your journey, and I know there's so much about it that can benefit a lot of people. So we'll just dive in today. Tell us a little bit about you.
Okay, well, I grew up I have a twin sister and a brother and a half sister as well. She was done moved out of the house by the time we come along. But, I didn't have the best upbringings. Both my parents were addicts. My mom drank real heavy. My dad was in and out of prison a lot. And, your hopes would be so high as a little kid waiting for daddy to come home. And he might do good for a month or so, and then it would be right back to the old behavior. My mom and dad, they fought like titans. And I was exposed to a lot of things children should not be exposed to. And it took me years into adulthood to realize how unhealthy and toxic it truly was.
For you at that point, was that just like a way of life? Like
it seemed normal to me. I thought everybody had something like that going on.
Yeah.
And I, like I said, it took a long time to realize this is not how people live,
Yeah. So were you and your twin the youngest children?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, we was. Even though we were twins, she was the baby of the family. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there was a difference there.
Somebody's got to be the baby, right?
Right.
I get that. So, what was life like for you?
Well, I can remember I was 9 years old when I started drinking coffee because I would get up at like 4:30 in the morning. I would have to wash dishes to make breakfast for my siblings. I would get them up and get them ready for school. And if my mom was too hungover to get out of bed to put my brother on the bus, because he was special needs, so he rode a different school bus than us that would come after my school bus ran.
Oh.
So if she wouldn't get up, I would have to put him on the school bus and ride to school with him. And, it carried on that way for a long time. I'm not sure what happened in my mom's life, but I realized early on that she had things that she couldn't see past. She couldn't see past her own hurt to be able to parent correctly. I remember being 8 years old and my mom was telling me in horrific detail things that had happened to her in her life. And she was drinking a beer and she offered me a beer, at 8. And I was like, no, thank you. No, thanks, Mom.
Was that hard to hear, some of the things?
Oh, yes.
At 8?
Yeah. I was kind of like my mom's therapist, so I got to hear way too much information. There's people go through things, and our job as parents are not to pass that on to our children.
Yes.
It's she just needed to talk about it, and she didn't really have anybody supportive in her life. So I got to be that person. Growing up, I wasn't allowed to have friends over until maybe I was a teenager, and then I could only have one or two over that knew what was up.
Yeah.
Like they wasn't going to judge me for the way that our house looked or the way that my parents behaved. And sometimes they would get a little squirrely if I had people over, but usually they reserved the real bad stuff for when it was just us,
Yeah.
And I can remember my dad telling us, whatever happens here stays here.
Mm.
You don't go and talk about our lives to other people. And it just seemed normal to me.
Yeah. Yeah. So were the friends that you have, was it kind of normal, to them? I mean,
The friend that I had
was
over the most, I mean, we've been friends since middle school, and she had seen similar behavior from her mother
Mhm,
early on. Her mother changed,
mhm,
you know.
mhm,
Her mother made choices that my mother didn't. She chose to get rid of the toxic husband, that wasn't
mhm,
healthy for the children,
mhm,
and changed her life, or tried to change her life, because she had battled with mental illness as well.
mhm,
And she improved.
mhm,
She worked for that for her children. And my mother, she, like I said, she was just so caught up on her own hurt, she couldn't see past it. And for years I stayed angry with that,
mhm,
and I stayed angry with my father for never choosing us.
mm,
That hurt, realizing that something is more important to mom and dad than us.
mm,
And I stayed bitter for that for a long time. But as I grew older, I had things happen to me in my life, and I got to see the world through their eyes. I got to experience, a type of hurt that's difficult to see past,
mhm,
difficult to grow from. And I struggled, I had my own battles with addiction.
mhm,
So I got to see where my dad was coming from. It wasn't that he chose to choose something over us, it's that he had to.
mhm.
And
It's hard when you're little, you don't understand what's
it
going
really is.
on with the addiction, and sometimes even as adults we grow to not understand that. And if you're not an addict, it's hard to understand the mind
Yes,
of an addict for sure. And so yeah, I get that. I get
it
that.
truly is.
Yeah.
Um, I left home when I was 17. I was the only one helping out. I remember the last year I was home, I did Thanksgiving dinner all by myself. And then my high school sweetheart come over and said, "Hey, we're going to go to my grandparents for Thanksgiving dinner." And I said, "Okay." And by the time I got back to my house, there was nothing left. I was like, "Thanks, guys." But, I'm glad they enjoyed it.
Yes.
Um, but my mom started being some type of way to me. And at first, she made me go stay with my dad because they was living in separate places at the time, and his living conditions weren't much better. And I was there maybe a couple days, and then I was like, you know what? Like, I'm going off on my own. So I started living with my high school sweetheart, and was with him 5 years.
Wow.
And his family was wonderful to me. They welcomed me like I was one of their own. And life was good for a long time.
Yeah.
Um, it was actually his grandmother that taught me how to drive, how to like do checkbooks and all this stuff. They
So
taught
completely different environment.
completely different environment. I had chores every night, and I'd do the dishes and I'd sweep and mop and things. So it was like my first introduction to what society really looked like.
Okay.
And me and my high school sweetheart, we might smoke a little marijuana. And then our last year of school, I remember he got kicked out for having hunting knives in his truck.
Mm.
And I mean, for him, it was off to the races for him. I don't know what he was doing while I was in school, but I remember we'd actually kind of broken up during this time, and I was riding the school bus to school. Well, one morning he pulled in behind the school bus, and so I waved the school bus driver on, get in the truck with him, and thinking he's going to take me to school.
Mhm.
He took me out in the middle of nowhere, brought out drugs, and was like, "You're gonna smoke this, or I'm not taking you to school."
Oh, wow.
And I had 30 something days to graduate.
Oh,
I graduated 11th in my class at like 700 kids.
wow.
And it's I had no choice.
Yeah.
So I went to school so high, and it was awful. I hated it so bad. Yet I still stayed high until graduation. It was very strange. But
It
it felt
had
like
you that quick, didn't it?
it felt like I couldn't spend time with him if I wasn't getting high, because he was around people getting high and he was getting high himself. And so I just fell in with the crowd, you know, if you can't beat them, join them.
Mm-hmm.
And
That fear of being left behind.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I truly loved him with all my heart, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and I just wanted to be around him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we get out of high school and everything, and I was like, I had stopped doing the harder drugs, you know, I was still smoking marijuana, but got pregnant
Mm-hmm.
and had a beautiful little boy, yeah,
Oh.
and was so excited for our lives to start. You know, we even discussed marriage and was like, we have the rest of our lives. Why rush it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the day before our son turned 7 months old, he died in a car wreck,
Oh.
and I could see it. It was so traumatic for me. I remember I went over there
You
barefoot.
saw the wreck?
I couldn't see the wreck itself, but I could see all the lights.
Oh.
And because I'd went to a friend's who lived right down the road from our house.
Oh, wow.
And I'm trying to call him. He didn't answer. So, and I had my friends go check because I had the baby.
Mm-hmm.
I also had another set of friends that lived down the road to walk up and see what had happened. About the time
In your gut, did you just know it was him?
I knew something was off.
Mm.
And by the time the ones I was at her house, she come back. The friends from down the road messaged me, honey, it's him and it's not good. So I went over there. I mean, like I didn't even put my shoes on. I was like, take me over there right now. And the officer stopped me and was like, whoa, 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 this is a wreck. You can't be here right now. And I said, is that my car? And he said, describe it to me. I described him the car, year, make, model of it, who would be driving. And I remember he took a breath, cocked his head to the side, and said, honey, he's gone.
Mm.
And that my whole world spun.
Were you expecting to hear that in that moment?
No.
I mean, you knew it was bad.
I knew it was bad, but I didn't think it would be that bad. Because, I mean, we're young, you know, we're 19 years old.
Yeah.
You know, things like that just don't happen.
Yeah.
But they do.
Yes.
You never think it's going to be you
Mm-hmm.
until it happens.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's such a shock, you know, because my parents didn't have healthy coping skills.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't teach me anything
Mm-hmm.
as far as, you know, what you do when tragedy strikes your life.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I drank real heavy for about 8 months. And I just quit. I had my dad take me to, because it was a dry county, it was on a Sunday. I had him take me to somewhere that was supposed to sell liquor, and they were closed. And I had a conniption fit on him. And it was the first and last time my dad ever looked at me like that. You know, because he was an addict himself, but he was into harder drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I can't do anything, Kelsey. And I was like, oh, Daddy, you've got to do something, because I need something.
Yeah.
I knew then, like, if I didn't get a hold of this, it's going to be a problem. So I quit drinking. A few months later, my son's paternal aunt started a custody battle.
Mm-hmm.
And it just so happened to be the day that I was going to go back to school, in the vocational school.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she thought she, you know, could maneuver things because she was a paralegal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she didn't realize, you know, like she was fighting a big family.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we went through all this custody battle. I finally get a lawyer and I talk to her, and the first thing she tells me was everyone would have to die but you before you ever got custody of your son back.
Oh, wow.
Little did I know, before the custody battle started, my son's great-grandfather took me to the lawyer's office and said, I need you to sign these papers or his aunt is going to try to take custody of him. I said, okay. So I started to read these papers. He said, oh, no, no, no. We don't have time to read the papers. I just need you to sign them and we can go. I said, okay, Paul, you know.
You
And
trusted him?
I trusted him with my life, you know. And so the custody battle gets started. And it was not going good for me.
Mm.
After my lawyer told me that, I I didn't know how to cope. I literally laid down on my floor and would just cry. I wouldn't eat. I cried, and I didn't want to do it anymore.
Mhm.
And somebody came to me and said, maybe I can help. And that's when my journey with harder drugs began.
That was the help.
That was the help.
Mm,
And because it was the only way they knew how to help, you
right.
know? Because of my behavior following that, I permanently lost custody of my son. And it was devastating. Devastating, I didn't know how to deal with it.
You were dealing with 2 griefs at one time.
Yes.
Wow. Wow. So how old was your son when, like, it was all said and done and you were like,
4.
so this went on for a couple years?
This went on for a couple years.
Wow.
Because I kept going to court, and I would, pass every drug test
Mhm.
except for my first one.
Mhm.
I failed a hair follicle for marijuana. And I told the gentleman doing the test, I said, I quit smoking marijuana 2 months ago. How do I prove that?
Mhm.
He said, you would have to pay $100 out of pocket to do a urine sample to prove that.
Mhm.
So I did.
Mhm.
I had to borrow the money, and then I had to chase that man to Carthage so that I could do the drug test for him and show that the same day the hair follicle was taken, I also passed a urine sample.
Mhm.
None of it mattered.
Wow.
None of it mattered. I did everything that the courts told me to do, and none of it mattered.
Mm.
It was so unfair, on top of the grief, the injustice of it, I couldn't get past for a long time.
I can imagine. We're going to pause right here and take a quick break, hear a word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Kelsey, I want to go back to the grief part for just a minute. I know a lot of people grieve differently. And here you were, where you had 2 situations that you're grieving at the same time. And like I said, everybody processes and handles grief differently. Do you feel like that you ever even got to process his dad's death, let alone, before all this started happening? Or how did grief affect you?
After his father died, like I said, I drank pretty heavy,
Mhm.
and whoever could fill my time, did to make myself feel better. And it seemed like as soon I'd quit drinking, I'd quit being promiscuous, I was finally feeling like myself again. I'd planned on going back to school, further my education. And then the police show up to take my son from me. And at first, I was like, okay, this is just some things. We'll get past it and I'll have my son back. And a year goes on, and my lawyer tells me that. When I heard those words, I simply didn't want to do it anymore. I wasn't even trying to cope. I just wanted to lay down and die.
Mm.
I didn't see any way out of it. I knew at that time that little boy was my best friend. And you could see the love he had for me in his eyes, and I loved it. I was, as a parent, you need to love and nurture and provide for your child.
Mm-hmm.
I did my very best to love and nurture him, but I didn't know how to provide yet. I was still just 20 years old myself and trying to do the best that I could, and still falling short, honestly. When the drugs were introduced, I just delayed grief for years. It numbed it so that I could go on about my daily life. And there's been, 10 years of numbing this pain. Nowadays, when I went into rehab, I actually spoke with a grief counselor on this topic. And when I told him the story, I thought I needed to grieve his father because he was actually gone. And I continued the story. He said, no, honey, we're going to grieve your son.
Oh.
And
had that thought even come to you yet?
No, it hadn't, because I didn't want to deal with it. I had pushed it so far away for so long. I was like, okay, I'm good now. I don't have to process this anymore. Because I grieve hard. I do. Now I like to say if anything was to happen, I'd be able to handle it better. But back then I had night terrors for apparently 3 years after all of this. And my husband was telling someone else, and I overheard. I had no idea that I was screaming for him and his father every night.
Oh, wow.
Every night he said I screamed for my son, I would scream for his father, and he just did the best that he could with it. And, I had no idea. Even though I was numbing this pain and not keeping it in the front of my mind, while I was asleep, my body was still trying to process this grief. It was too much.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you said 10 years goes by. So tell us what all transpired in those 10 years.
Well, at first, your habit isn't so bad. So you're still able to work, pay bills and all of this. And it got me into a lot of strange situations. I've had to help people overdosing since I was 10, 12 years old. So when people would come to the house or whatever, they would be in bad shape. I knew how to help them, and so I did that a lot.
You have been a caregiver since you were a child. Like, you don't know anything else but being a caregiver.
I don't know anything else.
Which is why it makes you such a great mom. I see that.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
I remember I've been in and out of jail for a little bit. The first time I went to jail, I only had to do 48 hours. And I remember I was so scared. And my husband was like, you're going to have to toughen up. You get in there and you do those 48 hours. You're not going to die.
I can hear him now.
And we were both out of jail, and my mother actually paid for us to get a marriage license. And we had a little bit of money left over, but it was all the money we had. We had like $11, and only 2 of that was dollar bills. The rest of it was change. And I remember the preacher, to marry you, his fee was like $25. And we only had $11. So we explained our situation, and he was like, okay, I'll go ahead and marry you guys.
Aww.
So we got married, and we were in some legal trouble. So we actually struck out running. And next thing you know, we were on a houseboat on a marina. And for a while there, it was, it had its ups and downs. It was, and I hated that feeling. Every time a car would pull in to the parking lot, I was like, oh no, that's the police. That type of fear, you always have to be on guard. It was awful. After, because the people we were staying with, that kind of fell through, as relationships always do in addiction. Me and my husband were homeless for almost 2 years. At the beginning of that, because we had come back home, and I had this car, and the transmission went out. So I was in my parents' driveway, and because I was still with my husband, they wouldn't let me inside. And while my sister was doing all kinds of here and there and whoever, whatever, but they wouldn't let me inside. In a home where everybody was always welcome as they were, addicted or not, they wouldn't let me inside.
Wow.
And that hurt. It did. I didn't quite understand it. If it wasn't for my husband, I would have froze to death in that car that winter. So winter months come and go. And
we're staying in the car all winter.
Staying in the car all winter.
Wow.
And weather's getting better. Then my husband gets his truck back, and we're in the truck, and we're traveling all around the country, just going from one high to the next. And I remember we were down by a creek one time, and there was this awful storm. It was so scary. And I was crying, and my husband, he just cuddled me up and said, it's going to be okay, or it's not. Either way, I've got you.
Oh.
And yeah. So we was able to go to sleep, wake up the next morning, carry on about our business. I had tried to get jobs during this time, and I would go to gas station bathrooms and bathe myself and change my clothes. And I remember a boss, when I was doing non-medical home health care, she brought me into her office, was like, okay, I need to know what's going on with you. You're late, you're not showing up, something's happening here. And I told her, I'm homeless, bathing in gas station bathrooms. I'm trying to get on my feet, and I just can't seem to get there. Well, 2 years go by, and me and my husband, we were done with it. We were like, we're gonna do this. We're gonna pick ourselves up by the bootstraps, and we're gonna make something of ourselves. So we got good jobs. Yeah, I remember, it was here and there, and then we landed a regular job that we stayed 2.5 years at. It was working nights because it was safer to sleep during the day, Got our own place, and things really started to turn around from there. We were on Suboxone though. Some people do great things on Suboxone. Me personally, I believe it's just another chemical to stay dependent on. I didn't know any other way to live. There was always had to be something there. And when I got pregnant with my daughter, I was still in active addiction. It took me a long time to be able to stop. And after she was born, I think it might have been 3 months after, I got back on Suboxone. And, we worked, took care of the baby, go back to work, the cycle, and stayed on that for years. And when we wanted to stop, I remember the doctor, my husband asked the doctor, so I want to get off this. Are you just going to keep writing me? Is there a method to get off this? Or are we going to keep paying you money until you die, and then you hand the practice over to whoever, and then we just keep paying them until we, how are we going to stop this? And she kicked us out of the clinic.
Oh, wow.
So we did what we could for a little while, and the next thing you know, here comes a relapse.
Mm.
It is so hard to stop Suboxone. In my experience, Suboxone has a worse withdrawal than the harder drugs. The only other thing that I've come off of that was as bad as the Suboxone was fentanyl.
And you couldn't wean off. I mean, you didn't have the opportunity to wean off of it if you weren't like getting the medical help to do that.
Yeah.
So it was like quit cold turkey kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's dangerous.
Yeah.
Because you get so stuck with like, okay, I need this to feel normal, just like you do with the drugs. And when you start going through the withdrawal, you can't function.
Yes.
It's so bad. And I had a little one, so it was not provide for my child or go and do something about it. And in my mind, there was no option. Go and use. So you can cook and clean and put on a face,
So would you consider yourself a high functioning, like were you high functioning, when you were using?
To a point. Depends on the chemical I was doing. Once I started throwing methamphetamine into the mix, I lost my mind. Every time. It was just a matter of time because of mental health medications I was on.
The mix was not good.
The mix was seriously unhealthy.
We're going to pause right there and we'll be right back.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like it was almost instant, like I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
We're back from the break. Kelsey, take us to the moment, the turning point moment for you.
Okay, a lot of people's rock bottom looks different. I didn't reach it when I was homeless. There was many a time when you would think I'd reached it, but I didn't. My rock bottom happened in the house that me and my husband had bought. My husband and little girl was in the next room sleeping, and I had been awake for so long, and my tolerance to the drugs had gotten so high, I literally couldn't afford my habit anymore.
Oh, yeah.
And so nothing ever felt like enough. I was always in limbo. My mental health was on such a decline. I was suicidal. It was not pretty. I remember I was crying, just hysterical. And like nothing major had really happened. I was just in such a dark place on the inside. And my depression manifests itself in a physical hurt. and I could not pull myself together.
Mhm.
It was because normally I would lay my little girl down to sleep, and I couldn't do it that night. My husband had to. And I remember I went in the room and I was like, I need you right now. I just need a hug. And he like swatted me away from, so I just went back in the bedroom and was hysterical. Finally, he got up and gave me a hug. And for some reason, he did not feel like my husband.
Mm.
It was like it was all elbows or something.
Mhm.
It was, there was no comfort in that hug.
Mhm.
So it just made things worse.
Mm.
And I was spiraling. And it was like a moment of clarity. I cried out to God for help.
Mm.
I knew I needed help somewhere. I was absolutely miserable. I was powerless to this. I had tried to quit using the fentanyl and the methamphetamine every way that I knew how and could not stop. I needed help. And when I cried out for help, it was instantaneous. I mean, like there was a peace that come over me that was startling.
Wow.
And I was quiet, and I looked around the bedroom, and I mean, I just didn't even say anything. Didn't even think anything. I was like, I'm gonna take it and run with it. So I went to sleep that night. Well, the next morning I had been going to an IOP in Madison for acute mental health illness that affects your daily life. Well, I went in, and I'd already been going a week, so this is the second week, and the counselor there says, I want everybody to get out a piece of paper and write down the one thing you don't want to talk about. And I said, excuse me, but I think you've got me pegged wrong. She said, what? I said, you've got me mistaken for someone else because I want to talk about it all. I want to know where I went wrong, who I did wrong, what I do to make sure I never get back in this moment in my life. And then I blurted out everything that was going on. The relationship between me and my husband wasn't good. The relationship between me and my daughter wasn't good. It felt like me against them. It was everything in my life was terrible. The drugs, the not being able to pay bills. It was awful. And when I got done ranting, because she just sat there and listened to me, she said, you're going to rehab. I said, what? Now? Now? You mean right now? And she's like, yeah, you're not leaving these grounds until they come and pick you up.
Wow.
And I knew it was divine intervention. And don't get me wrong, I was grateful for the divine intervention, but I was mad about it. I was mad about it at first. I was messaging my husband, cussing him. I was mad. I was mad. But I was like, okay, my options are to either run or do this. And I'm miserable here. Might as well go over there and be miserable. And I thought for sure, I know I've been in this game for far too long. They're going to kill me. I'm going to die here. My husband's going to sue the rehab. My little girl's going to live fat the rest of her life. And I was good with it. I was like, I'm okay. This is what's going to happen. Because like I said, I had tried to stop every way I knew how. Well, thank God the rehab knew what they was doing a little bit more than I did. And it began my journey in recovery. Yes, I miss my family, and it was scary, to go so far from home, but God had a purpose for me. He had a plan for me. I didn't have to continue to live the way that I knew how. He was going to show me a different way to live.
Mm.
And that rehab was exactly what I needed. It wasn't just a detox center. They did group therapy, one-on-one therapy, EMDR therapy.
Nice.
I didn't know there was a place like that ever,
Yes.
I didn't know it existed. And when I got there, of course I'm terrified, but I was going to do what was suggested of me. And I could have done better at it. Like, you're supposed to have a routine when you get into rehab. You're supposed to fold your laundry and put it away. And I would just cram my laundry under the bed. So, I had my little rebellious streak during it, but I tried to get everything that I needed to out of it.
Mhm.
And it was coping skills. What I really needed from the get-go, healthy coping skills. Call a friend. Get your mind off things. Talk to God.
Mm.
Those are the things that I needed to know way back when.
Way back when.
Way back when. Sometimes I wonder how things would have turned out if I took a different path. But I truly believe that every trial and tribulation that I've had to endure, that God's going to use that somewhere
Yes.
for someone. And I pray that it does.
He already does. I get to watch that. You're such a blessing to so many. And it's beautiful to watch the mom you are, So yeah.
Thank
God's
you.
blessed you well with those kids. So
He has.
yeah. So how long were you in the rehab?
I actually, after a week of being there, or no, 2 weeks of being there, I think maybe either or,
Mhm.
I'd gotten off the blackout period. And so immediately I try to contact my husband. So I contact him and I tell him, you need to jump with me,
Mhm.
which is the same thing I told him before I went into rehab. You need to jump with me. And he says, oh no, wait a minute. We need to talk about this.
Mhm.
Yeah, and we didn't get to talk about it. So here I call him up. I'm like, you need to jump with me. And I give him the number to call. And that same night, he shows up at the same rehab I was at. So
what'd you feel in that moment when you saw him? Did you know he was coming?
I wasn't for sure because of his hesitancy before. I was hoping he would listen to me, but I didn't know for sure.
Yeah.
And then one of the workers, because I kept running around trying to find it out, trying to find it out. And one of the workers was like, okay, I'm going to need you to calm down. Just go to your dorm, go to sleep, and everything's going to be okay. Just trust me.
Oh.
Just trust me. I'm like, all right, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to trust you. So I get up the next morning and they take us down for med pass and I see my car. And I'm hollering at everybody, that's my car, that's my car. And then the next thing you know, it's gone. I'm like, wait a minute, where'd the car go? Little did I know they had to park it elsewhere,
Oh.
So he was there. And I was so excited that he was there with me, It was, I don't recommend it for couples to go to the same rehab. It was a distraction. Lots happened, but we made it through it. And because he had come later than I did, I filed for an extension.
Nice.
So a 28, 30-day program, I stayed 38 days. And when I got out, he was still in the rehab. It was, I got lost coming home twice. Had to pull over and ask somebody because my phone wasn't working. And finally made it home. And I get there and there's no lights, there's no water. My cat's doing in bad shape. We still had 3 fish, amazingly, in that much water.
Oh wow.
The poor things, to be honest, I just flushed them. I said, go be free. And it's kind of sucky, to get out of rehab. Like, I've done all this work and I'm sober now, and then I get out to all the crap that I made. The mess that I made, and I've got to deal with it head on by myself.
Wow.
So I went to meetings, started meetings the day I got out.
Good for you.
And learned. First, I went to an AA meeting. Then I found out there was an NA meeting locally. So I went there, and one of the ladies there gave me her number and said, "Call me." So I started calling. And then my husband gets home out of rehab, and we're making a meeting every day. We even had to walk to meetings some days. Get rides here and there when we could. And we did over 100 meetings in 100 days.
Wow.
We knew.
That's great.
We knew in the beginning of our journey that we had to focus on that. 38 days off of chemicals is only the beginning.
Mhm.
And we had to put just as much energy into our recovery than we did our habit.
Mm.
And I'm so glad that we did.
Mhm.
We had to sell our house. We was able to get custody back of our daughter after doing all the things.
Which was a miraculous
It-
comeback in itself, wasn't it?
It was amazing, and it was crazy how it worked out because it was our first visit, like where we could take her somewhere.
Mhm.
And we had taken her to the park or something. I'm not sure where we took her,
Mhm.
but we go to meet back up with the foster parent, and the caseworker is there instead. And we're like, what's going on here? She said, well, the lady, because we had court that morning, and the judge was not so great to the foster parent. So the foster parent decided that we're going to be done with the situation, packed up all of her things, and took it to the child services building. And she said, the caseworker said, we're trying to find another family within the state
Mm.
that she can go to, but we're having trouble. And we were like, wait a minute, are you saying that she's gonna have to go out of state? And she was like, I don't want to get you guys excited. Wait, just let me check my phone. So she checks her phone, and she turns around and she's got this biggest grin on her face. And we're like, what are you grinning about here? What's to be happy in the situation? And she says, I talked to the judge. Your little girl is going home with you.
Oh. We're going to pause right there and we'll be right back.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them. Rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies. Find settings that allow them to be the most productive and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Kelsey, we are getting into this really good part. You have just found out from the caseworker that your daughter's coming home with you. What was it like? You weren't expecting that at all.
Oh no, it wasn't supposed to go down like that. Like, we did not expect it at all, and it was such a surprise. And the excitement, it was amazing. So we go and get her stuff, we bring her home, and we pretty much got a crash course in how to do this all the stuff sober. School, homework. We had to go and like redo her clothing because she had like summer clothes and it was getting towards fall. So we had to go shopping for her and stuff. And it was it was definitely a journey.
You got to be mom.
Yes,
Yeah.
and sober at that.
Yes. Yes.
And it was we had a lot of behaviors, things that I had showed her in addiction that we had to deal with.
Mhm.
Yeah, at first, my little girl, during visits, my little girl didn't run to me. She run to daddy.
Mhm.
And that hurt my feelings. I had to give her time to figure out that I wasn't who I used to be.
Mhm.
Because I was violent in my
Mhm.
addiction,
Mhm.
and it was not pretty. Um, we we did not expect to get her back, and we were so grateful. We still had all kinds of people coming in and out of the house, doing checks, passing drug tests. We focused on doing the next right thing, and we had to deal with these people for only a little while. And we did so good. We got full custody back of her 6 months early.
Wow.
It was amazing.
Oh, and then you ended up with another little bundle of joy.
Yes. I did not expect it. We were still doing visits with Lyric, and I remember I had just found out, and we went to a visit. And me and Lyric was talking about something, and we're on the swings, and she says, "But mommy, it still looks like you have a baby in your belly." Little did she know I did have a baby in my belly. So it was so exciting getting to tell her, and when she come home, it was definitely new territory to navigate.
Mhm.
Being so tired with the pregnancy, being sick every once in a while. And I remember she would be so worried every time I got sick. She would bring me a wet paper towel, but it usually
Aw.
wasn't a paper towel. It was like a coffee filter or something. She would put it on my head and get me some water.
Oh,
She was so concerned. It was so sweet.
she got that natural caregiver from you,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And we focused on doing the next right thing. We was bringing her to meetings, um, going to all the things, all the
Mhm.
recovery fests we could,
Mhm.
meetings. And we started chairing meetings, and it was our life grew. We moved places, and I remember when we told Lyric that she was having a little brother. She wanted a little sister so bad, but she growled at me when I said brother. But when baby got here, she she was curious, a little standoffish for the first 2 months because we're so fragile.
Mhm.
And now they are best buds. He can't wait for her to get off the school bus. When she comes in and she starts talking to him, he will start laughing. Like,
Aw.
he really engages with his sissy.
Aw.
And all the time she tells him, "Sissy is better than mommy or daddy." She'll be like, "Say sissy." And
Aw.
he just smiles at her. My family has grown to be such a beautiful thing. Not only do I have my daughter and my youngest son, but I have a beautiful recovery family that is there to support me in every way. It's it's better than I could have ever imagined it.
Only God can do that, can
Only
he?
God can do that, and only God is gonna give you more than what you've asked for.
Isn't that the truth?
Yes, he not only does he provide, but he provides in abundance.
Mhm.
And it's I'm so grateful the way everything has worked out, and I'm grateful for my rock bottom as well.
Oh, yeah.
Without it, it wouldn't have been the turning point for me. Without his divine intervention, I don't know where I would have went.
Yeah. Yeah.
I probably wouldn't be here.
It is so beautiful. You guys are seeing you guys early on, like right after I met you guys right after you come out of the rehab and watching you guys, like you have become this power couple, this power team in recovery. He's helping the guys and you're helping the ladies and you're leading these meetings and you just look back and think, wow, we did it. We did it. And your family, I mean, it's beautiful. I say this a lot on this show, but it's for good reason. But when That verse in the Bible that says he will restore to you the years the locusts have eat. You guys are absolutely walking that out and then some.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're a great mom, Kelsey. You care for those babies. You care for those kids. And Lyric, she's just such a joy. You can tell she's so happy to be reunited with her mom and dad. Like, so happy. So
She is a very happy little girl.
she is.
She tells me, and this goes back and forth depending
Yes.
on the situation, but normally every night she ends it with, "You're the best mom ever." And I tell her every night, I try. Because I do, my only goal in life growing up was to be the mother I knew I needed. And I try to do that with her,
You are changing the whole generational tree, Kelsey, from here going forward. And that is so, so big. Kelsey, I want to thank you for being on the show today. Thank you for your vulnerability and sharing and everything. What would you leave the audience with today?
To anyone listening out there, it doesn't matter what you've come from, what you've done, you can rebuild. God will forgive you and bless you not only with provisions, but with abundance.
Thank you guys for tuning in today. You are watching The Way to Break Free on Bold Brave TV. Like and subscribe, and you will be notified each week when we go live. We'll see you next time.
This has been The Way to Break Free with your host, Angela Pedigo. The one thing Angela attributes her personal victories to is her relationship with God and her deep faith. Tune in each week and hear stories and testimonies of people in personal and professional trenches and how they overcome them with their own faith in God. The Way to Break Free has something for everyone, everywhere. Right here, Wednesdays, noon Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network.